She snapped at an ordinary customer, only to find out he owned the place, and was Clint Eastwood. The midday sun spilled through the tall windows of Sierra Grill, a modest but lively spot tucked in the heart of Carmel by the Sea, California. It wasn't high-end, not exactly trendy, but it had that local charm, a little rustic, a little modern, and just the right kind of cozy that made it a favorite on warm Thursday afternoons. For Megan, a 23-year-old waitress barely keeping her head above water, charm didn't mean much when the shift was chaos. "Table 7 needs extra dressing," a fellow server called out. Megan didn't look up. She was scribbling yet another order on her notepad, ponytail swaying as she rushed from table to table, juggling complaints about undercooked steaks, split checks, and missing drink orders. And as if that weren't enough, 3 rude customers had stiffed her on tips in the past hour. So when a man in his 80s shuffled in and quietly sat down at a corner table, Megan was already at her breaking point. He looked like he didn't give a damn what people thought. Wearing a wrinkled flannel shirt, faded jeans, and a weathered Stetson hat resting beside him. His boots looked like they'd seen their fair share of dust and dirt roads. Megan gave him a quick once-over, her lip curling in a faint smirk. "Great," she muttered. "Another one who's probably just going to order a coffee and leave me $1. But she couldn't dodge him forever. "You've got table 12, her coworker whispered with a nudge. Megan sighed, grabbed her notepad, and slapped on the kind of smile that said, "I'm pretending to care." She strolled over. "What can I get you today?" she asked, her tone teetering on the edge of impatience. The man looked up. His eyes were sharp, studying her face like he saw more than he let on. There was something familiar about him, but Megan couldn't place it. "Just a burger," he said, calm and steady. His voice was gravelly, low, and carried the weight of someone who didn't need to raise it to command attention. "Burger. Got it," Megan replied, tapping her pen against the notepad. "Anything else?" "No, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat slightly. She rolled her eyes as she turned toward the kitchen. "Ma'am? Really?" she muttered under her breath. But something about him stuck with her. He wasn't like the others, rude, demanding, impatient. He had a quiet confidence, like he was in control without needing to prove it. Still, to Megan, it was just another table, another order, another $1. When she returned with the burger, she placed the plate down with less care than usual, her forced smile barely hanging on. She was running on fumes. "Here you go," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she dropped the ketchup bottle beside his plate. "Anything else?" He glanced down, then back at her. "No. This looks just fine. Thank you." His words were polite, but something about his tone made her feel off. Like he saw right through her. She hovered a second longer than she meant to, annoyed by his calmness. Everyone else in the restaurant was loud or angry or in a rush, but not him. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, leaning against the table without really meaning to. "No, I'm not," he said, slicing his burger cleanly in half. "Thought so," she said, smirking. The hat gave it away. "Looks like you just stepped out of an old Western." He smiled for the first time. Not a big grin, just the faintest lift at the corners of his mouth. "Something like that," he said. She expected him to get defensive, maybe bristle a bit, but he didn't. That somehow annoyed her even more. "You know," she added, her voice lowering like she was sharing a secret. "Most people around here don't show up looking like they just rode in from a ranch." He took a slow bite of his burger, thoughtful. Then, after a pause, he replied, "I guess I'm not most people." The words hit heavier than she expected. Simple, sure, but they made her feel oddly small. She blinked, flustered for a moment, then quickly straightened up. "Well, enjoy your meal," she said, turning on her heel before he could say anything else. She thought she'd had the last word, but as she cleared a nearby table, she noticed something. He was still watching her, not in a creepy way, but there was something about his gaze that made her feel like she was being assessed. Judged, even. It wasn't hostile, just unsettling. Like he could see something in her. she couldn't see in herself. And though she couldn't explain why, it bothered her more than she cared to admit. That look, quiet and steady, would end up shifting the course of her day, maybe even her life, in ways she never imagined. As the lunch rush finally tapered off, the once bustling Sierra Grill grew quiet. The clang of plates and the buzz of conversation faded into the hum of soft music and the occasional clink of silverware. Megan leaned against the counter and exhaled, scrolling aimlessly through her phone while half watching the dining area. Her eyes drifted to table 12. The old man was still there, calmly finishing his burger, sipping water, and surveying the restaurant like he was soaking in every detail. "Hey, Megan," her coworker Danny said, passing by with a tray. "Isn't that guy kind of, I don't know, weirdly calm? Like he's just observing everything?" Megan shrugged. "Yeah, well, some people have all the time in the world," Danny chuckled. "Maybe he's famous or something. He looks kind of familiar, doesn't he?" Megan rolled her eyes. "Famous? Please. If he's famous, I'm the Queen of England." Danny raised an eyebrow but let it drop. Megan clearly wasn't in the mood to speculate. Instead, she grabbed the check for table 12 and made her way over, keeping her smile polite but tight. "Here's your check," she said, setting it down with a flicker of courtesy. "Whenever you're ready." The man glanced at it but didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, his eyes lifted to meet hers again, calm, unblinking. "Do you enjoy your job?" he asked, his tone soft but direct. Megan blinked, caught off guard. Her smile faltered. "It's fine," she said after a beat, shrugging. "It's a job, you know." He nodded slowly, the expression on his face unreadable. "A job is what you make of it," he said. "But it seems like you're carrying a lot today." Her cheeks flushed. Who was this guy to psychoanalyze her? She crossed her arms, defensive now. "Look, I've had a rough shift, okay? Not everyone gets to sit around eating burgers and handing out life advice." To her surprise, he didn't flinch. He just leaned back slightly in his chair, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Fair enough," he said. "But sometimes how you treat people when things are hard says more than how you act when everything's easy." Megan felt a flicker of irritation rise. Was he seriously lecturing her right now? She opened her mouth to fire back, but before she could say a word, he stood, reaching into his pocket. "I'll leave you with that thought," he said, placing a few bills on the table. "Thanks for the meal." And with that, he turned and walked toward the exit. "Yeah, whatever, cowboy," Megan muttered under her breath, watching him go. But just as he reached the door, something strange happened. From the back office, Carol, the no-nonsense manager who ran the place with military precision, suddenly emerged, her face lighting up the second she saw him. "Mr. Eastwood," she called out, hurrying over with her hand extended. "I wasn't expecting you today." Megan's stomach dropped. "Eastwood?" Her head snapped toward the door, her eyes wide. And there he was, Clint Eastwood, smiling faintly as he shook Carol's hand. For a brief moment he looked back. His eyes met Megan's, and there it was again, that quiet, knowing look. Then he turned and walked out the door. She just stood there, frozen. She hadn't just brushed off a quiet customer. She'd dismissed Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood. And more than that, he owned the restaurant. Her notepad felt like dead weight in her hand as her thoughts spun. Every sarcastic remark, every eye roll, it all came crashing back with a new horrifying clarity. "Megan," Carol called cheerfully, waving her over. "Can you believe it? Mr. Eastwood dropped by. He's been so busy lately I haven't seen him in weeks." Yeah," Megan stammered, her voice dry. "That's... wow." Carol didn't notice her panic. She was too caught up in the moment. "You know this place means the world to him. He's involved in every little detail. That's why I'm always telling the staff, bring your best. You never know when he'll pop in." Megan felt like the floor might give way beneath her. She ran every interaction through her mind like a movie and fast forward. Only now she was the villain. "Are you okay?" Danny asked, catching sight of her pale face. I think I need a minute, Megan mumbled, turning and heading for the break room. The moment the door shut behind her, she collapsed into a chair and let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. What had she just done? How had she been so oblivious? 2 years at the Sierra Grill, and not once had she paid real attention to the whispers about the elusive owner. The stories were always there, floating around in break room chatter and tossed-off remarks during slow shifts. But she'd brushed them off, too caught up in her own routine to care. If she'd listened, really listened, maybe she would have recognized him. Or at the very least, thought twice before snapping at a customer who turned out to be Clint Eastwood. Now all she could think was, what happens next? But Megan had no idea. Clint Eastwood wasn't quite finished with her yet. The next morning she showed up to work with a knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. She hadn't slept. Every moment of the previous day kept replaying in her head, like a scene she wished she could rewrite. His calm, unwavering stare. That quiet nod. The way he left without a single harsh word, and yet somehow made her feel smaller than any reprimand ever could. What if he had told Carol? What if she was about to lose her job? Rent was due in 2 weeks. Her student loans weren't going anywhere. She couldn't afford this, not now. So she threw herself into her shift like a woman on the edge, smiling too hard, over-apologizing, refilling drinks before they were halfway empty. She couldn't remember the last time she'd tried this hard. By the time the lunch crowd rolled in, the restaurant was buzzing again. Megan was wiping down a table near the front when a voice, low, familiar, and impossible to mistake, cut through the noise. "Well," it said, "looks like you've got your hands full today." She turned on instinct. There he was. Clint Eastwood stood near the counter, his hands tucked casually into his pockets, dressed almost exactly as he had been the day before, but this time his presence hit harder, more deliberate, more grounded. It filled the room, her stomach dropped. "Oh, Mr. Eastwood. Hi. I didn't think you'd be back so soon." He tilted his head slightly, unreadable. "I like to check in from time to time, keeps everyone sharp." Megan laughed nervously. Her hands were suddenly damp. "Right, well, everything's running great today." He scanned the room, then glanced back at her. "I can see that. But you seem a little tense." Of course he noticed. He probably noticed everything. She opened her mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain away yesterday, but he held up a hand. "No need to apologize," he said, his voice even. "I'm not here to make your life harder." She blinked, thrown off by the kindness in his tone. "You're not?" "No," he said. "But I do think there's something to take from yesterday." He paused just long enough for his words to settle. "You never know who you're talking to or what they're carrying. A little grace goes a long way." Megan felt something catch in her throat. She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded, her eyes stinging. "I've had rough days too," Clint continued, his voice softer now. "But the way we carry ourselves in those moments, that's where character shows, and people notice." Her face flushed. He wasn't scolding her, not really. But the weight of his words hit deeper than any lecture. He wasn't trying to shame her. He was trying to teach her something. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost too softly to hear. He gave her the faintest smile. "You're welcome. Just remember, every interaction is an opportunity. Use it well." With that, he tipped an invisible hat and walked out, leaving her rooted in place, heart pounding, thoughts racing. And for the first time in a long time, Megan felt a flicker of something unexpected. The desire to do better. Over the following weeks, Clint's words lingered like an echo. Every time she stepped onto the floor, they returned. Every interaction is an opportunity. At first, she didn't know what change was supposed to look like. She wasn't about to start handing out fake smiles or gushing like some of her co-workers. That wasn't her. But maybe it wasn't about faking it. Maybe it was about caring, just a little more. So she started small. When a frazzled mom with 3 kids spilled a soda across the table, Megan didn't roll her eyes or sigh. She grabbed a towel, offered a warm smile, and said, "Don't worry, happens to the best of us." When an older couple needed her to repeat the specials 3 times, she didn't let frustration show. She slowed down, explained again, and even suggested her favorite dish. And the strangest thing, the more kindness she gave, the better she felt. One evening near the end of her shift, Carol called her into the office. Megan's stomach twisted as she stepped inside, bracing herself. Carol folded her hands on the desk and looked at her, steadily. "You've been here a while now," she said. "And lately, I've noticed a change in you." Megan tensed, unsure where this was going. "A good change," Carol added, smiling. "A real one." Megan blinked, surprised into silence. She didn't know what to say, but in her heart she knew exactly who to thank. Megan hesitated, caught off guard. "Oh, thank you. I'm not really sure what changed." Carol smiled. "Whatever it is, keep doing it. The customers have noticed, too. One of them even filled out a comment card the other day. Said your service made their day." Megan felt something bloom in her chest. Part pride, part disbelief. She hadn't thought anyone would notice. She certainly hadn't expected anyone to say anything. As she stepped out of the office, a smile tugged at her lips. She still had a long road ahead of her, still plenty of growing to do, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she was heading in the right direction. That night, as she locked up the restaurant, her eyes drifted to the sign out front. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was something more. A place where she could grow, learn, and maybe, just maybe, make a difference. And she owed it all to the quiet cowboy who'd walked through the door on a regular afternoon and left her with a lesson she'd never forget. Because sometimes it's the smallest moments that shift everything, and every single day is a new chance to become something better.